Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a look at various forum post scenarios using the ASP.NET MVC framework. The code for this demo is using the beta of the MVC framework. The code base should stay relatively the same when it goes from beta to final release. We're going to work our way up through simple forum post scenarios all the way through using a model binding that is part of the MVC framework. Model binding is a way to allow us to pass in complex objects into our action methods as parameters. Previously, without the use of a model binder, you could only pass in simple values such as strings and integers into your action methods. The new model binder provides the facility to build those complex types on the fly for you without you having to do a lot of manual work. So let's go ahead and start it. The first thing I want to show you is I have a simple form here. It's got two properties in first name, last name. And I want to show you how we can build a post scenario where those two fields or values will be passed in as parameters. I've already got an action result called index, and I've given it the action verb, except verb of get. I want to create the same thing but do it as a post. And we're going to go ahead and create a string, and we'll go first name, last name. We're not going to actually do anything with our values in today's demo. We're just going to show you how you can pass them in and handle them in your action methods. I've created two properties here. One is first name, one is last name. And if I bounce over to my HTML here, you'll notice my text box for first name is name first name, and text box for last name is name last name. The MVC framework is smart enough to know that if you have a form field that is named first name and a action parameter named first name, it'll map those two. So let's go ahead and hit F5 and run this. Go ahead and kill this, and I'll hit save here, and I'll balance, and you'll see that first name was popular with Derik and last name was popular with Whittaker. That's pretty cool. That works pretty well, but you know, that doesn't really do us a lot of good if we have a form that has more than 2 or 3 parameters. Because if we have maybe 10 fields on our form, this list can get long and hairy in a real big hurry, and it's not something I want to deal with. Not something I want to manage. So how else could we do it? Well, we could do it with model binding. Now, something that's new with the beta version of the MVC, which will be the same, should be the same in the production version, is the ability to bind to complex objects. I've got an object called person. And let's bounce over and take a look at this person real quick. You'll notice it's just got 3 fields on it: first name, last name, and age. Nothing special, nothing major. Well, I can change my action result signature to take person as a complex type, and I can have the MVC map all my form fields to the appropriate properties. Now, in order to do that, there's a couple different things you could do. The first thing I like to do is I'm going to go over to my HTML, and I'm going to name my fields with person.firstname, person.lastname. This is the name of the object, which would be the parameter of my controller, and the property in which it should map to, which also maps to the text box name. You don't have to do it this way, and I'll show you how you can get around that here in a second. Let's go ahead and save this. Put a breakpoint on my controller again. Let's rerun this. Let's go ahead and refresh this page. Now hit save. Bounce over to my code. You notice that person is not null. It is an instance of person, and first name says Derik and last name says Whittaker. That works out really well. I've now saved myself a lot of time, a lot of energy. I don't have to create a massive parameter list in order to pass in all my values from my form. And we did this by using the built-in model binding. By default, it works. You don't have to do anything out of the box. All you have to really do is specify first name dot last name or object dot property. Now, what if I don't want to specify, first name? Maybe I don't want to clutter my HTML with my object types or my parameter names. I just want to leave it as first name, last name. Well, I can go ahead and do that, but by default I can't leave this code the same. I'm going to have to change this ever so slightly. So I can go ahead and use the bind attribute, and I'm going to tell it that my prefix is empty string. By telling it's empty string, it actually will not look for it as an object dot field name. So let's go ahead and hit F5 again, see what happens. Okay, so this is refreshed. Let's take a look at my HTML just to make sure that it's right, and it is. Let's hit save. Now again, my person is not null and everything is mapped correctly. So I can see that by removing the object name in my HTML and changing my binding prefix to empty string, I no longer need to sprinkle my object types throughout my HTML. Now, pretty cool. Now, I could also change this prefix to be anything I want. If I want to make maybe underscore as my field names, I can do all that good stuff. Now, what if I want to only include certain values? For example, maybe I don't want last name to be passed in. How can I do that? Well, in the bind, I can also say include, and let's do first name. And I can even do exclude last name. And I do need to put back my prefix to empty string because otherwise I'll have to go back and change my HTML, and I don't really want to do that. Let's go ahead and hit F5 again and rerun this. Wait for my form to load. I'll hit save. And now my first name, again not null, which is good. First name is Derik, last name is null. So that tells me that my include worked and my exclude also worked. Now one thing you want to pay attention to, if I accidentally misspell first name, what's going to happen? Let's go ahead and refresh this page. Go ahead and hit save again. Person is now null because it couldn't find a single field to map to. Now if I had removed this exclude, and did first name last name but left first name misspelled again, it should populate my person object with the last name but leave the first name null again. What I want to show you here is that if you misspell something in your include or exclude, it doesn't quite work right. You'll get some weird results, and I want you to just pay attention to that whenever you're doing this. So you'll see last name is populated correctly, first name is not. Now one other thing you could actually do if you really wanted to is you could say, you know what, let's get rid of, actually we'll keep the prefix. We could also then pass in a forms collection. Excuse me. And the forms collection will have all the values populated in as well. And you could actually do this in place of having a complex object passed in. And maybe you'd want to manually map all your values. So I could do forms collection. I could do something like this. And personally, I don't really like to pass in the forms collection, but where it is nice is if you are big into testing and you want to be able to push in your values in your form collection and use the auto mapping capabilities of the MVC. That's out of the scope of the screencast to show you how that stuff works, but it is there. It's called, if you want to take a look at that, it is called the update model, and that's built into the base of the controller. So I've shown you about 3 different ways you can pass in values, a couple different ways you can use the binding context within the model binding stuff. And hope you've learned something today, and I hope you find that using the MVC can make your form post scenarios much simpler, much safer, and much easier. Until next time.